job teaching what is today called middle school. It was then called junior high school. Hated every minute of it. Liked the people, just it wasn't where my heart was. And eventually I ended up at a high school where that was fun. I got to sort of run the school newspaper and teach the kids about critical thinking and fact checking and get the administration mad at me at a whole bunch of different junctures because they were very, very conservative and I was not. And, et cetera, et cetera. But long story short, I got a job at a local station. It only had like 250 wonderful watts. But to me, it was like my wishes and dreams came true. Okay. Didn't make much money. Didn't matter. I was making my money teaching. And then when my shift began in the afternoon, so I'd teach in the morning, go over and be on the air in the afternoon. My students got a huge kick out of it. And I was on the air at WCAS in Cambridge, Massachusetts, okay? About 5 miles from Boston. And, like I said, 250 wonderful watts. And it went off the air at sundown, but didn't matter. To me, it was like, oh my God, is there this much wonderfulness in the world? And I was just minding my business one day. I know I've told this story before. And John Gorman, who was the program director at WMMS in Cleveland, but was from Boston, was evidently home visiting relatives, or so the story has been told to me. And he heard me on the air, liked what he heard, made me an offer sight unseen. I had never been to Cleveland. I wouldn't have, yeah, I could find Cleveland on a map, but I'd be lying to you. All my life, I always wanted to work in Cleveland. All my life, I always wanted to be on the radio, and here was a chance. And I walked away from tenure in the Boston public schools. I mean, I could have been a tenured teacher, which meant they wouldn't fire me, this, that. Nope. It wasn't where my heart was. No offense to the Boston public schools. I love them to this day. I always donate. I know many of the teachers there, but it wasn't where my heart was. So I had a chance to go to Cleveland, and off I went in October of 1973, much to the consternation of my parents, who did not understand why I had given up a stable gig in a profession that girls were supposed to go into to chase a dream that they didn't understand. But I
Yeah.
did.
Yeah.
I did.
And, WMMS, for those who aren't familiar, is like quite a legendary station when it comes to sort of breaking artists. I mean, I'm a Bruce Springsteen fan, and I know very well that Kid Leo and a
Yep.
lot of the people
This is
there
what we
would.
did. This is what we did. I mean, we rejuvenated the Moody Blues. We rejuvenated Aerosmith. We took all kinds of bands that you never would have heard of in your life, but we got behind them. That's what I was able to do for Rush. I could
Mhm.
not have done that at a lot of stations. There were a lot of stations where it was like, here's the playlist, here's what you're going to play, have a nice afternoon. Okay. But because I was the music director, I'm listening to new bands first. I'm hearing new bands, but it wasn't just me. I mean, other members of the staff also listened to new bands. We had this collaborative thing that we did. We'd vote on songs, et cetera, et cetera. And sometimes someone would champion a band the way Kid Leo did with Springsteen, the way I did with Rush, the way John Gorman did with Aerosmith, et cetera, et cetera. It was a very exciting time to be in radio. Now, there were a lot of things going on that I wasn't terribly fond of, but there were also some things that were really exciting and a lot of fun. WMMS was just really starting to establish itself as a huge station. It was overtaking what had been the big station, WNCR, and pretty soon we would, in fact, be number one. So it was
Mhm.
kind of cool to be there at the beginning of that and to watch that happen.
Yeah. And, for anyone here listening that, hasn't heard the famous story, I think it'd be great to hear how you found Rush and how that all happened.
Yeah, I don't want to bore people that have heard it 30,000 times, so I'll give you the 25 words or less. Um, I had long been friends with record promoters from a bunch of different cities, countries, I mean, I love breaking new bands. I was a music director in my college station. I did some of the music directing when I was in Cambridge, not all of it. The program director was a guy named Rick Starr, and there was also a music director, but we all had input, is what I'm saying. And it was really great to be able to just break new bands. So I would keep in touch with record promoters. Now, I know what some people are thinking when I say that because it was the era where there's a lot of payola, sex and drugs and rock and roll. And those of you that know me, you know that I don't smoke, I don't drink, I don't do drugs. I do remember the 60s. I've never done any of that stuff. I was in it for the music, not for the lifestyle. Okay. So when I made friends with the record promoters, that was very disconcerting for them because they were like, what can we give you? I ice cream would be good, donuts. I mean, whatever. But not to give me a thing, just give me some new music. And one group of people that I had made friends with and played their stuff at other stations was Canadian record promoters. Okay. There were a number of really good Canadian bands that I had played from the Guess Who, Bachman Turner Overdrive, but lesser known bands, like Bruce Coburn, Valdi, etc., etc., etc. And I love Claire Lawrence, so on and so on. By the way, Claire Lawrence, just such a talented jazz fusion performer. I loved his records. I was happy to play them. Nobody's heard of him today, but that's the things you could do, said Donna, who insists that Miles and Lenny should have been a number one record. But it wasn't. Can you give it all to me? Find it on YouTube. Miles and Lenny, can you give it all to me? You'll be sitting there going, why wasn't this a hit? I ask myself this often. But that's my point. You could be a music director, you could break new bands, but just because you broke them, that doesn't mean they were going to be popular. Donna, I thought you said this was a short version. It sort of is, because one of the record promoters that I was friendly with, Bob Roper, with whom I am still in touch 50 years later, Bob Roper was a fan of Rush. He had seen them locally in Toronto. He was a Toronto record promoter, and his label passed on their homegrown record. At that point, he could have taken the record and thrown it into the garbage. Instead, in an act of altruism, he sent it to me. You know what he got for doing that? Bupkis. He got absolutely nothing for doing it other than the knowledge that he had tried to help a band. And I played that record. I played Working Man. And what did I get from it? Also Bupkis. I had no way of knowing that it was going to become popular. Just like I mentioned with Miles and Lenny, just because you break a band, just because you play Claire Lawrence, just because you play Valdi, doesn't mean anyone's going to care. But I just knew there was something about Working Man. I knew it was a great song. I knew it would resonate with the audience. Did I know that 50 years later we'd all still be friends? Nope, had no idea. And neither did Roper when he sent it to me. But that's the fun of being on the radio. And the moment we started playing that record, people started requesting it. At first they thought it was Led Zeppelin, but never mind that now. But they started requesting it. And in the end, I ended up getting in touch with their management, who could not understand how their record got to Cleveland. They just had a little local homegrown record, which I still have. And that whole thing about From My Cold Dead Hands, I will never part with that record. Okay.
Yeah,
People make me offers all the time. I'm like, no, no, no. And I'm very proud that I have it. I will hang on to it as long as I'm on this earth because it changed my life. So,
for
yeah.
sure.
So, from an act of altruism, just when you think, oh, my listeners and friends, just when you think that that little good deed you did didn't make a difference, you never know.
Yeah.
You never know. I've talked about mitzvah many times before. I am your basic friendly Jewish person, and the word mitzvah is usually badly translated as a good deed. It means a lot more than that. It means a positive action that makes the world better in some way. And you don't do a mitzvah for the result. You do it because it's the right thing to do. Bob Roper was not paid to send that record to Cleveland. He sent it because he believed in the band. He thought they deserved a chance. His label wasn't going to sign him, so he knew I had played some of his stuff before. He figured maybe I'd play this, even though it technically wasn't his. He sort of knew the band, so he was trying to do a mitzvah. And I played it, and I was trying to do a mitzvah too. I was trying to give them a chance. Did I know they were going to put my name on their record album when they got a U.S. recording contract? Nope. People say to me, hey, did you get a finder's fee? No, I got a 50-year friendship. How lucky am I? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. When did you first meet the guys in the band?
Probably June of 1974. They did a show, and I have a really, really bad quality picture of the marquee, but they did a show in Cleveland. I would be lying if I said I remember everything about it. The only thing I remember was they were really shy. They were really young. And when they performed, they looked really, and I say this kindly, they didn't look polished, okay? They looked like three scared kids from Toronto, but they were excited to be there. They were happy to be there. I think it was at the Allen Theater, and I could be wrong. But bottom line is that one of their managers was with them, and I still remember standing up back watching them, and I remember him putting his hand on top of mine and saying, don't worry, Donna, we won't let you down. And they never have. They have never let me down. But again, do you think, Donna, that you knew from the moment you... No! I mean, when I saw them on stage, I saw three kids that I still thought had potential, but they really needed to get some experience. I was just so happy to see them down in the States performing. There were people that knew their stuff. They were really surprised. And the next thing that happened, they were signed to a U.S. label. Rutsy was gone. Neil joined the band. And the rest is history. But you know what? I will not let people mock that first album, because John Rutsey, God rest his soul, he had severe diabetes. He was a kid. He wasn't taking care of himself, but he was a very competent rock and roll drummer, and he got no respect. Had he been in better health, I sincerely believe he would have latched on with another band. And he was kind of like a Ringo Starr kind of drummer back in the early days, and Ringo got no respect either. Today, people listen to Ringo and they're like, he's a lot better than I remember. Yeah, that's exactly my point. And if you listen to Rutsey and you don't compare him to Neil, just compare him to Rutsey, and you're like, three-chord rock and roll drummer. You know, that's good backfills, good, good timing, knows how to do this and that. Fine. And if the band hadn't wanted to go in a different direction and hadn't wanted to take their music to the next level and hadn't really needed someone that they thought could write better lyrics, Neil might not have joined the band. But they knew what they needed. They knew that they had gone about as far as they could go. They knew that they didn't want to just be a three-chord rock and roll bar band in Toronto. They had their sights set on something more than that. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but that just wasn't where their hearts were, just like my heart wasn't in being a school teacher. You gotta know where your heart is, and you gotta give it a shot and go for it. So yeah, so I met Rutsey once. As I said, very shy. We didn't have a long conversation. They were heading for the gig. They were just trying to look cool, but the reality was I'm sure they were terrified. And The fact remains, when Neil joined the band, everything changed. But you know what didn't change? They never forgot me.
Hmm.
I spent the first, I'd say 3 years of their career kind of being like a big sister to them. And then they didn't need a big sister. They had their act together. They were more polished. They were putting out more adventuresome kind of music, this, that. They could have forgotten. They could have just been like, oh, yeah, whatever. The fact remains, I was championing their music from behind the scenes for years, okay? I fought to get them a star on the Walk of Fame. I fought to get them inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I did not do that alone. I'm just saying that, like, I was always out there telling people they ought to play them, talking to other radio stations, saying, you got to give this band a chance, etc. etc. They knew. They knew I was on their side.
Hmm.
And they were always on my side. It's a funny thing about that. These are three, and I'm talking three because even though Neil's gone, I'm talking about the times when I knew them, when they were a unit, okay? And these were three guys who valued loyalty. They were just completely loyal to the people that had been there for them, whether it was people in their road crew, whether it was people that they'd known along the way at radio, or whether it was people that interviewed them, etc., etc. They knew who their friends were. They cared deeply about their friends, and they never did forget me. It's a funny thing.
Yeah.
When I was on stage with Getty in November of 2023 during his book tour, he basically asked for me to do the question and answer in Cleveland. I saw him in Boston. I was not up on stage, nor did I expect to be. Okay. There was an excellent music journalist who was up on stage, and God bless him, it was perfect. Um, I was backstage with Getty. I mean, we talked for, oh my God, a half an hour probably. And that's when the idea came to him and his manager, let's fly Donna to Cleveland. And they did. And when I was up on stage, you can see it. It's on, Talk About Everything's on YouTube at one place or other. Um, when I was up on stage with him and he invited me out, and people didn't know that I was going to be the mystery guest, as it were. And when they announced my name, and I got a standing ovation, which was like, you know, and Getty said something like, I wouldn't have a career if it weren't for you. And this is like 50 years later, and he's one of the most famous musicians in the world. And he's saying to me, a working class kid from Dorchester, Massachusetts, I wouldn't have a career if it weren't for you. This is how special these guys are, okay? This is how special they are because they never forgot their friends.
Hmm.
And something I always respected about them.